Under the arches of a huge, dark cave, there is nothing but an old sword stuck in the ground and a closed gate. This is a dungeon that is so difficult that even half of the so-called geniuses known as heroes and holy knights couldn't reach this room. But they do not include a young man who is resolutely approaching his goal. Two indistinct figures follow him to the closed gate. This young man belongs to the best class for conquering this dungeon alone. And this class is a Tamer. The stone doors open with one hand. The foot steps into an unknown room. This cave is big, and the only light that comes in is from the door that's just opened. A sinister figure with a long pole sits on a stone pedestal at the other end of the cave. There is a decent distance between the young man going forward and the enemy. The creature has the face of a monkey, sharp teeth, and a shiny crown. His muscular body inspires awe, and his clothes, even if worn, indicate that the creature is not simple at all. This creature that looks like the Monkey King of legend is the boss of the dungeon, and the young man finally sees what it looks like. The monster lets out a battle cry, showing all its sharpened teeth, and he charges, taking off on his flying cloud. His weapon, a long pole, spins rapidly in the monkey's paw. The young man stands ready. He is intently watching his opponent's every move, and when he swings, preparing to hit the pole. And when he hits it so fast, it's like the weapon has magically multiplied. The young man can dodge lightning strikes, but the first attack shows him that the battle will not be easy. The dungeon boss freezes for a while, aiming with the pole. The muscles in his arms tighten and expand so much that the bicep encircling part of his armor bursts under the pressure. And then the pole shoots forward, growing larger, becoming so long that it crosses the entire cave. And the end of this pole is aimed directly at the face of a young man who did not expect such a thing. But he has time to react. And it seems that this moment turns out to be the perfect time to execute some plan, because at the young man's command, something starts bubbling and bubbling under his feet. The substance turns into a shield, like a liquid with eyes, and stops the pole. The youth summoned the awakened Ultra Slime. She now holds the boss monster's weapon. And he doesn't look happy. Taking advantage of the pause in the battle, the young man then summons the awakened Lich. A cute little creature pops out of his shadow. The crown on the monster's head begins to crack due to the Lich's spell directed at it, but then it recovers and abruptly contracts around the monkey's skull. The monster screams in pain, clutching at the tormenting ornament, but it quickly stops squirming, instead pulling a tuft of its fur from its head that looks more like a lock of hair. This surprises the Lich. The monster then throws its fur into the air. The strands fly in different directions, and in flight, they begin to transform. At first, the silhouette is unclear, but in the end, small versions of the dungeon boss appear, with their own flying cloud and pole. With a furious cry, these little clones fly to attack. The Lich appears to have been destroyed by two hair monsters, and he has to lean back hard to avoid the damage. But they disappear behind the young man, crashing into the ground. The main opponent grins, as if victory is already behind him. Still, the young man remains grimly calm. He needs a little more time. The Monkey King sends the last of the clones into battle, but it's too late. It's all over for him now. Something sinister begins to form behind the young man. An indescribable figure with many eyes is propping up the cave's vaults. The awakened Yog-Sothoth was summoned. The creature's eyes shine in the darkness before attacking. It removes slimy worms. Now, all enemies will drown in the sea of knowledge. The Monkey King freezes, not understanding what is happening. And then, the summoned creature's gaze falls on him one last time, and destroys with a series of explosions, leaving only experience points from the dungeon boss. The Tamer class has two features that make it the strongest class. The first is the division of experience. That is, the master of tamed beasts also gets all the experience gained by them. And the Monkey King, who was killed by Yog-Sothoth, really lost a lot of experience. And the second ability is Awakening, which can strengthen even ordinary tamed beasts to a ridiculously absurd level of power that can even be called legendary. A good example is Slime. Thanks to these two features, the Tamer is without a doubt the strongest class. And the young man is proud to relate to him. Now that the boss is down, you can relax. And praise the summoned creatures that helped in the battle for their good work. The Lich and Slime, however, continue to look at their host expectantly even after that, and he understands what they want. This time, you can grant them their wish. The young man opens a magic space to get a reward for his animals. From a black crack in space, a corner of a bundle appears. These are animal chips, which summoned creatures enjoy greatly. First, the young man opens the pack. Then, it completely unfolds it, so that access to the treat is convenient. Animal chips are every monster's favorite snack. Everyone who eats them will immediately fall in love with this taste and get an irresistible pleasure. As long as the slime and lich are doing exactly that, the young man can distract himself. After all, it's time to collect the trophies left after the dungeon boss. For winning, he received the Nimbus Cloud, a cloud-shaped flying vehicle that only transports the owner and his allies, and Rui's Staff, a stretchable weapon that can be extended indefinitely, and the speed of changing dimensions exceeds the speed of sound. The young man uses storage magic again. That's where all the loot will go. The staff is the last to go into the dark, but then the previously pliable darkness of the vault becomes sticky, tenaciously embraces the hand that the young man did not have time to remove, and with a splash, it begins to consume his entire body. He can only watch in horror, and swear when the black liquid is already touching his face. The unbreakable embrace of his own magic was definitely not part of his plan. Eventually, he got sucked in, and all around was swallowed up by darkness. The young man did not think that such a thing could happen to him. The last thing in the vault is dragging my feet. The lich and slime reach out to their master worriedly, and he remembers a conversation he heard once. Rumor has it that if the storage magic malfunctions, the affected person will die, but he will be reborn in another world with all his memories and the contents of this very magical vault. The young man died. The memories continue to flash through his mind. First meeting with the lich, taming the slime. He would like to go on a few more adventures with his summoned beasts, smile at them, but no one knows if the story about the magic storage problems is true. And yet, the familiar memories end, and they are replaced by an indistinct pile of completely different ones. An unknown woman wants no one various to take care of himself. Faces, views, and events. A man ordering a useless tamer away. The young man tries to understand what these memories are. His body had changed irrevocably, but his consciousness hadn't returned to normal yet, until he suddenly opens his eyes. The boy lies on the ground while another child stands over him, laughing along with the faceless singers. He calls out to whatever is lying down, telling Various to get out of the way, but the boy is more interested in something else. His eyes are full of surprise. After all, he had survived. But he doesn't understand how Lisu ended up in this, and who this Various is. Suddenly awareness comes, because that's what it is. He's 8 years old. The boy raises a trembling hand. He covers his face, shocked. After all, he has all the memories of this Various, and the boy who taunts him from top to bottom is Purcell, the son of the feudal lord of this region. And his class is the Holy Knight. Purcell urges Various to say something, but Various can only stare back at him grimly. After all, the realization that in this world, his class is considered the worst is far from pleasant. Because of this, it's normal for others to call him a useless tamer. But Various can't help but react to that. So he asks what's wrong with the tamers. Purcell's answer is simple and harsh. This attitude is just common sense. And even though Various wants to tell him to stop showing off in vain, because the tamer is the strongest class, but in time, he remembers that he is already in another world. It seems that he really did have a malfunction in the magic storage, a 1 in 100 million chance of encountering it. And now, he was reborn in another world. While the other kids make fun of him among themselves, Various thinks about how he needs to sort out the current situation. Even if Purcell and his cronies keep making fun of him, it doesn't matter. Various just sighs at this behavior. But something sinister appears from behind the trees. When it takes a step closer, the children notice it. A monster that looks like a big pig in clothes is approaching. And don't let Purcell look worried. Various is scared. After all, there was such a monster in his world. Purcell pulls out his sword, vainly declaring that he can handle this pathetic orc on his own. And even if Various is shouting at his back, trying to warn him, it's too late. Purcell is already attacking the monster, which turns out to be not an orc, but a young chohakai. This is a demonic pig, very similar to an orc, but even at a young age, equal in strength to two heroes. And such a monster is no match for the holy knight Purcell. The broken tip of the sword flies away after hitting the creature. But Varius himself, without his beasts, doesn't stand a chance against him. The monster is terrifying just by looking at it. Purcell is shocked by the breakage of his sword, and is useless. With the physical strength of an 8-year-old's body, it would be difficult for Varius to escape. But he doesn't want to die like this, right after his reincarnation. So it slowly rises from the ground. He looks for a way to defeat Chohokai in the current situation and thinks back to that conversation in the tavern. Varius doesn't know if he can be trusted, but it has to try, and so it opens its repository again. While the other children can only stand in horror and sweat as the demonic pig approaches, Varius rummages through his vault. He pulls out a staff, the one that belonged to Boss Ruyi, to the Ape King, who wasn't Varius' last opponent back then. It gives you a bit of confidence. With such a weapon, he would be able to defeat Chohokai. Varius takes up a stance, preparing to attack, but suddenly Purcell, trembling in front of him, blocks the road. He keeps his serious gaze fixed on the monster and tells Varius, the useless Tamer, to back off. The demonic pig silently watches the people's movements. Purcell's stance becomes more determined. He grabs his broken sword and exhales. His hand is still shaking, but the boy still thinks the monster in front of them is just an orc. Meanwhile, Varius is watching the enemy and sees him start forming something out of magic in the palm of his hand. It looks like Varius even knows what it is. For the uninitiated, the result looks like a simple black book made of magic. But the reincarnate knows more and tries to stop Purcell from backing down. But he is already rushing into a new attack. After all, how dare some orc look down on a holy knight? Purcell leaps high and swings his blade, and then abruptly lowers it, attacking. But the monster isn't afraid. Ink streaks of magic appear on the pages of the summoned book. Varius rests his staff on the ground. He has no doubt that the demonic pig has the ability to stun all enemies within its range. And while the other kids are screaming in fright, and Purcell gets directly hit by the spell, feeling the full power of the horror scripture. Knowing that this formidable skill activates almost instantly, Varius orders Ruya's staff to increase, and just in time, he soars up on it, watching as the forest beneath his feet explodes in a riot of magic. Fortunately, in the air it does not reach. Balancing on the pole is safe. But if it had hit him, it would have paralyzed him with fear. Varius' eyes catch on something. Following the staff, he summons the Nimbus Cloud, and then switches to it. Now, it is much more convenient to observe the situation below. And Varius sees Purcell's unconscious body. He can't let this child die in front of him. So you must kill the demonic pig and save him. At this time, the monster is preparing a new spell, looking directly at Varius hovering high above. But he intercepts the staff horizontally. He puts it on his shoulder, taking aim, and orders to grow. Just then, the monster is about to attack again. He throws a bunch of magic up, but it flies past, barely grazing Varius. But the pole rushes down with great speed, affecting the air around it. It hits the demonic pig's neck directly, breaking it. The monster's heavy body falls, and a small blood fountain gushes out of the wound. Falling makes a lot of noise, but the pig doesn't move anymore. Varius looks at it doubtfully. Still, he flies his cloud to the ground to check if the enemy is really dead. Fortunately, the monster died. The danger was over, and Varius himself gained a lot of experience for killing. Now he can exhale and relax a little, and then do other things. For example, take the children to a safe place. Varius hoists Purcell onto his back and tries to drag him to his cloud. It holds the unconscious body for a second. But then the boy falls through. Even in this world, the cloud only seems to carry the owner and their pets. But this really complicates things. There are two other people here who are unconscious, besides Purcell, and Varius doesn't know what to do about it. He ponders his options. When a man comes out of the forest, who heard the noise and came to check if the children are all right. But right away, he spots an orc. Moreover, he quickly realizes that this is not an orc, but a Chohokai, and all the more incredible to see such a monster dead, and to know that the 8-year-old boy sitting here had killed him. even if he says that he just got lucky with the weapon that helped kill him. Various asks the nervous man to help him carry the wounded, and he agrees. Then he looks at them, and he notices that one of the victims is Purcell. This is bad, and means that they need to hurry. But the man's face darkens as he silently examines the boy. And then my eyes fill with horror. Something's wrong. Various is trying to find out what happened, and Purcell doesn't seem to have a pulse. It's too late to save him. Various doesn't immediately understand what the man means. He is on the verge of horror himself. After all, now only a high-ranking healer can help Purcell. For a few moments, Various just stares at the body in front of him and asks me to leave it to him. After all, they don't need a healer to do this. The man tries to understand what the boy is doing in front of him. With this 8-year-old heart, it is impossible to massage a stopped heart. But there's only one spell left. Various stretches his arm and starts casting. He conjures the powers born of his magic to let Purcell's heart beat. Then he puts his hands on the other person's chest and uses heartbeat recovery magic. Purcell's heart reacts. The boy coughs up a small amount of blood, and he seems to start breathing again. Various checks his pulse by putting his fingers to his neck. Just like defibrillation or heart massage, this magic sends electrical signals through the body. Even an 8-year-old Tamer can use it as if it's everyday magic. The pulse is felt successfully. Still unconscious, but still breathing. Still, Various watches him closely for a while longer. He was afraid that he might not have enough mana, but his heart was beating steadily, so there was no reason to worry. This makes him feel relieved. The man looks at Various more and more nervously. She even asks him who he is, even though she knows the boy is a Tamer. But when he confirms this, he uncomprehendingly asks how it is possible for the Tamer to use healing magic. Calmly, Various replies that it was just ordinary magic for simple injuries. He is surprised by the man's reaction, because this is what they teach in security classes. But suddenly he realizes that he has no recollection of such lessons. The man looks doubtful, having never heard of such an everyday spell. But in the end, he admits that he doesn't know much about magic anyway. Various is surprised that people in this world know so little about magic. But what's more important now is that they have to go. The unconscious children were put on the transport brought by the man. Now we need to hurry up and report everything to the Lord. But the man still cares about something. He notices Various black hair. In this world, hair color shows your class. Black hair belongs to Tamers, pink hair belongs to healers, light hair belongs to holy knights, and red hair belongs to heroes. Even this man knows everyone's opinion of Tamers. More precisely, that they are quite useless. But now he's more interested in where Various comes from. After a pause, he answers, Various from a small village on the way to the Millennium Tree. The man knows this place. Moreover, he had heard that there would be a training session for Tamers. This piques Various' interest. The man advises him to go, since this is a training session for his class, and also just for children. Various happily agrees, as this is a great opportunity to learn more about Tamers in this world. After a while, they finally arrive at the Lord's residence. The maid runs out to meet them, worried, and not alone. The man explains something to the three of them at once as they stare at the unconscious Purcell. The Lord's son is then placed on a stretcher, and they are carried away under the pleased gaze of Various, who managed to save this child. The man is busy, so he has to leave. He asks Various to explain to the Lord exactly what happened. The boy thanks you for your help. The servant respectfully escorts Various to his room and asks him to wait in it. The boy does not hesitate to go where he was told, and he examines a rather large and rich, albeit at the same time, empty room. This empty room is the reception area. Various sits in a chair, all alone, waiting, when the door handle finally turns, and the door opens. The lord of these lands enters the room and bows slightly from the doorway, expressing his gratitude for saving Purcell. He apologizes for keeping me waiting, and he admits that his son might be a little rude. But that doesn't change their relationship, so he wants to thank Various again. He only meekly says that he just happened to be there. But the Lord asks the boy not to be so modest, and he says he's heard that Various used some interesting healing magic. He explains that everything is not so, and the spell was related to ordinary, everyday magic. And then he talks about the principle of its operation. The spell sends out electrical waves that massage the heart. Although the Lord had never heard of such a spell, it had proven effective on his son. He's nervous, but he can't help but notice that Various used a rather old-fashioned method of applying magic by chanting. But this method was the best option. After all, it was magic that could hurt if you put in too much effort. And when using chant, the power of the spell does not depend on the caster. After all, if the person being treated experiences an electric shock during a heart massage, this will lead to a fatal outcome. The Lord understands all of the explanations, but looks intimidated by the information. But he says that he met several young talents, but someone with such flexible and rational thinking as Various for the first time. So the Lord wants to write a letter of recommendation for him at the Elite Academy. The suggestion shocks Various. The Lord then clarifies if the boy is a tamer, and with the thought that even here his class is being looked down upon, Various asks if there's any problem with that. Rather mildly, the Lord says that due to his age, Various may not know what it is to be a tamer in this world. It is considered rather unsuccessful. After all, in battle, their physical and magical abilities are lower than those of other professions. And while they can tame monsters, it's almost useless, as they can only control creatures that are weaker than themselves. Ultimately, a tamer is the worst profession. The Lord admits that if he writes a letter of recommendation for a person with such a profession, they will laugh in his face. Various realizes that the situation with tamers in this world is worse than he thought. Time passes during the conversation. It was already dark. Since Purcell's condition should be stable by now, Various wants to leave. The Lord apologizes for keeping him, because the boy must be tired. The servants say that the carriage that will take Various home is ready, but he gratefully refuses their help. And with a wave of his hand, he opens his vault. It won't be difficult for them to get there by themselves, using the cloud. The boy jumps on his transport, and he bows his last farewell. All the Lord and servants can do is watch him go. The cloud carries it up at a very high speed, leaving behind a bright trail. Mourners do not even immediately understand what happened, and when they do, they get very nervous. The maid even fell down, startled. She wonders if all tamers have such mystical equipment. But the Lord denies such a possibility. He has never heard of such items. From this, the look directed at the already empty sky is filled with nervousness. The Lord can only wonder who this child is, full of surprises. Used a healing spell, defeated Chohokai. Various is definitely unusual in many ways, so the Lord is going to seriously consider recommending him to an elite academy. Meanwhile, somewhere in the sky, Various lies on a flying cloud and thinks. He wants to learn more about the tamer profession in this world, and he remembers that there will be lessons for them. The next morning arrives, in my family's little house. Various stands in the doorway, preparing to leave, and says goodbye to his mother. She smiles and wishes him a good trip. The boy is interested in what today can bring him, when the sun is already at its zenith. Tamer lessons are in full swing. A tired man stands in front of a battered, unconscious big monster. The man's face is masked and covered in sweat. He's trying to catch his breath. Another man, wearing broken glasses, missing some of his teeth and covered in blood, gives advice on taming weakened monsters. To make such a person your servant, you need to use contract magic. One of the students with a branch rushes to attack the slime, and he hits her with all his might. And when a wounded monster tries to crawl away, it uses magic. He can now touch the slug unhindered. After all, he had tamed it, even if the monster didn't look happy. The students around them are cheering. But Various, watching from his cloud, isn't happy at all. It's much worse than he expected. Children with wooden sticks attack weak monsters, and those who manage to tame the slime are already insanely happy about it. But the sight makes Various cover his face in shame. And when he tries to look at the lessons again, he knows he can't take it anymore, so it flies away. Their understanding of tamers is completely different. What they practice here is simply abusing a monster. With this method, awakened evolution is simply impossible. Remembering his summoned beasts, Various thinks about what being a tamer means to him. No matter how much he claims that the tamer profession is great, the words of an 8-year-old boy will only be laughed at. Although, remembering the reaction of the man who found him and the other children in the forest, and Various has no choice but to prove his case with real results. After all, this world does not understand all the charms of the Tamer. Various strongly thinks that if he continues to show good results, the status of the Tamers will improve. He's not going to let anyone call it the worst profession. And first, he has to tame more monsters in his own way. For example, an armored bug-like creature. There should be someone around the millennial tree who can be useful as a partner. Various looks at the large tree in front of him in surprise. He is interested in seeing what the 1,000-year-old tree of this world is like. The boy flies past him on his cloud. In his previous life, such trees were called Tamer treasures. They were places where many monsters that had experienced rapid growth rates due to their awakening gathered. Naturally, the competition there was very high, and monsters were tamed very quickly. Various jumps to the ground at the roots of the tree. He puts his hand on the big trunk and notices the obvious. No matter how much he looked around, there's no one around. Magic is concentrated in Various' palm, and then it sends it to the tree trunk. The magic spreads out in circles, reaching up to the crown. He closes his eyes. Very little time passes, and something at the top sparkles brightly in Various' perception. He found the one he was looking for. All that's left is to get it out with the resonating blows of Rui's staff on the wood. By doing so, it will not harm the tree. It looks like the plan is working. After all, something lands behind Various, leaving a crater. A large beetle-like creature can be seen in the clouds of raised dust. This is Caucasus, the strongest monster of the Nascum type. Total length, more than 1.5 meters. It is called Blackwing because of its ferocious fighting power. He is very intelligent and can use telepathy. Menacingly, the beetle approaches the waiting Various. He leans right up to Bug's face and telepathically asks if the brute who disturbed Bug's sleep is a boy. Without a trace of fear, Various admits this and apologizes for being so rude to him. Then he adds that he's here to talk to the bug. He's ready to listen. Then Various clears his throat, and she confusedly suggests that the beetle become a tamed monster. There is silence for a few seconds. Then Beetle realizes what has happened, and just tells Various to die, preparing to attack. The boy looks at the approaching blow. His power is enormous, but Various manages to dodge, even though he admits that it was dangerous. After a single blow from the beetle, a long trail was left on the ground. This is indeed the strongest of the insect-type monsters. Various is startled by the destructive power he sees, and all this is before the awakening evolution. This only increases Various' determination to make the beetle his slave. The boy stands right in front of a large rock, and the monster stares at him for a few moments. Then he swings again. The beetle watches the clouds of dust for a while, completely indifferent. He prepares to leave, saying that he thinks the boy's murder is his revenge for waking him up. But it freezes. He looks up in surprise at the floating cloud. A little tired, but saved Various offers to calm down and talk. This behavior of the little man angers the beetle, so he unfurls his huge wings and promises to pulverize Various. It starts abruptly up, leaving behind clouds of dust. This makes Various curse. His cloud also flies higher, avoiding a collision with the monster, but the chase continues. Beetle gets angry, assuming the boy is running away, but he plans to use the full power of Ruya's staff, which even Caucasus can't handle. The boy notices something, and abruptly descends back to the ground. Jumping down from the cloud, he pulls out his staff. The beetle, of course, notices everything. He swoops down, asking what Various is trying to do, but he silently holds out his staff. It hits the ground right in front of the monster. This blows him backwards. At first, the beetle just looks in shock at what is happening, but then consciousness leaves him. Some time passes while the monster is unconscious. Finally, he opens his eyes. Various stands in front of him, waiting for the bug to wake up. He doesn't understand what happened. The boy then explains that when stretched at the speed of sound, Rui's staff generates a shockwave, and Various used it to knock out the bug, and he covered himself with a cloud of nimbus as a shield. Confused, the monster accepts this explanation, but he still doesn't understand something. After all, if the guy in front of him wanted the bug to become his servant, why didn't he just use his magic while the bug was unconscious? Then Various smiles softly and admits that it doesn't make any sense. After all, he didn't need a slave, because he was looking for a companion. Various pulls out a familiar chipset from his storage, saying that therefore they will have to come to a mutually beneficial agreement, and then he hands the treat to the beetle, offering it to try. He looks even more confused looking at this. The best treat Various has to offer is monster chips, but the beetle looks incredulous. He is surprised that they are trying to bribe him like this. Still, something makes him keep looking at the treat. Moreover, it looks more attractive by the second. So Beetle agrees to try since the boy insists. He gently takes the chipset right out of Various' hand and rethinks his past distrust. The taste of the chipboard makes his eyes glow. He grabs Various with his paws and enthusiastically asks what kind of delicious food they just gave him, and, more importantly, if there are any more. Awkwardly, the boy says he has a supply, but recalls his question about taming. Without a doubt, Beetle says that if Various can give it to him all the time, then he agrees. It turns out that the ingredients are hard to come by, so the boy will only be able to give him chips once a month. But there is an alternative in the form of animal jelly, which has the same taste. This also suits the beetle. So it's time to start taming. The boy and the beetle are alone in this huge space by the tree. They are facing each other. Various knows that Caucasus is no sucker, but the power of monster chips is such that for monsters, they are so delicious that they drown out their instincts. Therefore, the beetle looks expectantly at the person who is going to tame it. Now the contract is concluded. Various says that he is pleased to meet his new colleague, and he reciprocates. They clap their fists in a friendly way. After that, Various takes Caucasus to the Tamer training area. Children enthusiastically stick to the monster. Such a picture makes the teacher stare in shock and lose consciousness. Various sits down in the shade of a tree next to the unconscious adult, while the other children surround the beetle with cheers. They clearly didn't expect to see such a strong, tamed monster. The beetle is nervous from such attention. He orders the boys around him to get away from him. But in the end, you have to ask for help from a rather observant Various. He is already making plans for the future, going to improve the level of training of tamers. Later, a loud noise is heard somewhere in the forest. Various and Beetle hunt local monsters. They move together on the cloud, and they wander around, talking quietly. Whatever monster attacked them, Caucasus easily gets rid of it, quickly and without mercy. For such a good job, Various can't help but praise his comrade. But a thought occurs to him. The boy stares at the beetle so intently that it can't help but ask what's the matter. But Various just wants to know, albeit belatedly, if the beetle has any unfinished business near the 1,000-year-old tree. The monster thinks about it, and since the boy is interested, he has something to say. Various looks at him with interest. Caucasus wants to deal with one bug, Hercules. They often fought near the Millennium Tree, but their fights always ended in a draw. So the two of them just lived in the tree for a month. Various seems pleased with his words. After all, that's what he wanted to hear. Then he makes a decision. After all, this is a good opportunity to make Caucasus stronger, which is what Various suggests, saying that he can help his beetle outperform that Hercules. This causes Caucasus to ask again incredulously. But in order to do this, you need an impeccable attitude of mutual trust. Various face is resolute as he asks if Beetle can silently trust him to do whatever is necessary. Caucasus looks doubtful, but Various looks at him with the same determination. Then the beetle makes a decision and relaxes. Exhaling and closing his eyes, he agrees. Various thanks him for his trust by opening his vault. Round, flat plates fall from a crack in the space in front of the boy, who has sat down on the ground. Beetle watches them, uncomprehendingly, and asks what it is while the boy collects the fallen things. It seems that these are the necessary materials for awakening. He collects them in a single pile, and he puts it in front of him in some sort of order. All preparations are now complete. Various resolutely begins his ritual, and calls out to Keelan. He asks for the gift of power by addressing the plates in front of him. Small round discs begin to emit columns of light. Finally, he applies awakening evolution to Caucasus. His already massive body is brimming with power. Magic flows through Chitin. The beetle seems to glow. He's confused, feeling the power overwhelm him. This makes you want to test yourself, and soars sharply into the air, aiming for the sun. A circle of churning dust rises around the remaining Various on the ground. Caucasus feels invincible, as if he doesn't care about anything. Various can only stare after his companion in confusion, and try to remind him to come back for dinner. Now, whatever the boy does, his experience increases. While walking home, while calmly reading, while he spends time with his mom, helping her. This activity of the Caucasus makes him feel restless. Finally, when night falls on the world, a large figure flies past Various' house. A huge wyvern soars in the sky. Her eyes are burning, searching for victims. The noise makes the boy and his mother sitting at the table freeze. But when the woman stands up, hoping to find out what happened, Various continues to sit. A shiver runs through him as plaster falls from the ceiling of their house. The boy's hands are shaking violently. Before he knew it, he'd bent the spoon so badly that it couldn't be fixed. But the boy is distracted by his mother's scream. He whips out his staff, hurrying toward her. The woman lies in the doorway, unconscious from fright, which makes her son scared too. He jumps out into the street and realizes what it is that has so frightened her. The wyvern's muzzle meets him face to face, but the boy, who is already in a fighting stance, lowers his staff when Caucasus crawls out from under the body of the dead wyvern. Now you can see that a large fist is clearly imprinted on the neck of the corpse. The boy lets out a sigh of relief as his bug brags about defeating the wyvern in one hit. Various says that Caucasus scared the hell out of his mom by bringing such a huge thing home without warning. Beetle apologizes without much guilt on his face, and even if the boy is very uncomfortable looking at the wyvern's corpse, now he understands why he got so much experience, and praises the beetle for the work done. Caucasus is definitely pleased with the praise. Happy and proud, the beetle continues. After all, that wasn't all he wanted to report. An approaching sound is heard from the direction of the distant moon. A creature with bright eyes approaches them, and it looks like Various knows who it is. Something Caucasus wanted to report, other than the wyvern. Approaching them with great speed, a small creature with bright eyes is vaguely silhouetted against the moon. It accelerates even more, and Various loses sight of him. But a voice comes from nearby, making the boy look around. Finally, the creature flies up to his face, and it turns out to be Caucasus' friend, Beelzebub. This monster is the king of flies. He is quite intelligent and able to talk, and is also good at being supportive. For example, it can increase the defense of allies or activate special attack statuses. Various is surprised, having heard that some beetles rarely cooperate with others. But this is a great exception to the rule. Various says how pleased he is to meet Beelzebub, and carefully mimics shaking hands with him. Caucasus seems pleased that the two of them got along. He also brought something like a souvenir. In the forest, the beetle found a tempting-looking book, badly damaged by mud. The boy looks at the gift with square eyes. Caucasus doesn't know what the book is, but it's full of words, and Beelzebub said Various would like it. The boy and the fly exchange looks of complete understanding. Now Various looks around to see if anyone is nearby, and with great enthusiasm devotes all his attention to the book in his hands. He can't help but wonder what kind of book it is. The magic in the boy's fist is forming, and redirects to the workbook. Various uses purifying magic. He and Beelzebub on his shoulder are looking at the pages excitedly, but as they get cleaner, their facial expressions change. Various seems surprised by the contents. The cleaned cover says that this book is a study guide for those who want to enroll in an elite academy. And let Beelzebub apologize, because he thought it was something more interesting. Various' reaction is different. Looking at the book in his hands, the boy turns to his bug friends. His gratitude is loud and clear, because this book will be very useful to him. This surprises the king of flies, but everything is understandable. Various had been improving his Tamer skills step by step after attending that dreadful class and hoped to enter an elite academy. Because he is so happy, the boy decides to treat the bugs to something delicious. After all, these two had brought him a good book, and Beelzebub was now part of their team. Beetles are absolutely thrilled at the prospect of eating delicious food. But first they need to wait a bit. Various first addresses the Killin. He asks him to appear before him to make a mutually beneficial deal. the atmosphere of the peaceful forest begins to change. Caucasus and Beelzebub flinch at the appearance of an overwhelming force. A huge clot of energy begins to form in front of them, revealing a majestic being. It looks down, eerily, right at the boy. This is the Killin, a deity who bestows blessings on his followers. It exchanges the monster's corpse for an evolution awakening, or for a special ingredient for animal chips. A huge figure towers over three, disproportionately larger than each of them. Both Caucasus and Beelzebub stare in shock at the majestic creature, and it asks Various what the boy wants, an awakening of evolution or a special seasoning. Various chooses the seasoning, and the Killin demands to see the gifts that he has prepared. Before the paws of the deity, a repository for gifts opens. The boy opens his own right above him, and a stream of monster bodies falls down as an offering. Various also commands Caucasus to put the wyvern's corpse in the Killin vault. When a large body is hidden in the darkness of an indistinguishable space, the Killin accepts his gifts. In exchange, he gives her what Various asked for, 2 small glass jars full of seasoning, and then it disappears. The boy bends down to pick up his reward. Now it has all the ingredients, so he takes out a large pot and starts cooking right outside. Both jars of seasoning are sent to a pot of water, and after some more manipulations, animal jelly is ready. This is a more affordable substitute for animal chips, but it still has the same effect. Various cuts the jelly into pieces and invites the bugs to eat as much as they want. After all, today is a special day. Beelzebub tries this delicacy for the first time, just like Caucasus, and they're both thrilled. The night around the campfire is filled with laughter and joy. After that, 3 people walk through the forest. The Elite Academy of Magic is the most difficult institute for studying magic to enter. So now, in order to slightly improve his chances of passing the exams, he improves his stats with a special Tamer skill general experience. And when he walks through the woods, together with Beelzebub, under the command of Various, Caucasus goes into battle, and when working in a team, it gets stronger. Now they are surrounded by a swarm of flying insects, which aggressively rush into the attack, but Various easily fights them off with Ruya's staff. And while Caucasus is engaged in battle, he is covered from the back. Beelzebub is also able to attack, despite his size. During the battle, Various has enough strength to think. He puts his hand to the ground and releases a wave of magic. In this world, tamers are treated with prejudice, even if they fight with the same precision and ruthlessness that Various does, literally punching through a tree with a staff and the monster behind it. Therefore, the boy is going to enter the academy as a sage. After all, what is a professional privilege? This is an opportunity to use professional magic, spending less mana, and the sage can use magic of any other class, while spending relatively less mana. In other words, Various, as a tamer, has an excess of mana due to the general experience skill, which makes it easy to imitate the sage. But sages usually have blonde hair, so he would need a spell to whiten his own. Time passes. Winter has come. Thus, Various worked hard in Beelzebub's company. He solved problems from a book found by bugs, experienced illnesses due to overwork. I studied incessantly, all in order to prepare for the Elite Academy exams. When once again the boy falls asleep at the table, studying. Caucasus, who supports him to the end, covers him with a blanket. On a bare tree outside the window, closed kidneys, they begin to bloom. 4 years have passed. And with a notebook in his hands, the result of his hard work, white-haired Various is ready to start executing his plan. The Elite Academy can only wait for him and his tamed monsters. Due to a 1 in 100 million error in storage magic, the young man was reborn in another world as a boy named Various. However, unlike in the past world, where tamers were considered the strongest, here they are the worst class. As a former tamer, it's hard for Various to accept this fact. So he's going to apply his knowledge from his past life and show this world just how strong tamers really are. To begin with, Various took the strongest of the coleopteran insects, Caucasus, into his team, and his friend Beelzebub. And then, I decided to enroll in the best institute for the study of magic, the Elite Academy of Magic. Now there's only a day left before the exam. Even if the exam is tomorrow, just in case, Various decides to stay in a hotel near the venue. After all, the academy is waiting for him and his beasts. But it's raining hard outside their door. The boy's mother doubts that he will make it in such a heavy rain. But Various asks you not to worry about him. He pulls something out of his space. This is the nimbus cloud. It goes out first, and it forms a wide dome that protects from heavy rain. The three of them had already climbed up to the cloud, and Various' mother was looking at them in surprise. A woman prefers not to think too much and just accompany her son on the road with a bright smile. She wishes her boy success, and he waves to her from the cloud and promises to come back. The road passes peacefully. Beelzebub, who is actively buzzing around, is happy that it is so convenient to be under the protection of the nimbus cloud, and Caucasus asks them how long they'll need to fly. If nothing happens, the trip will take about 3 hours. The beetles accept this answer, but Beelzebub's antennae twitch. He notices something below. It looks like there's something wrong with the carriage under them. Various stands up and looks down without much interest. Magic sparkles in his eyes, helping you notice what the problem is. It looks like the carriage is stuck in a puddle and can't move. Various slaps Beelzebub for noticing the problem. Because he is so useful, the King of Flies demands to give him a treat. And even if the young man is amazed at such impudence, he agrees. But only after they help the people in the carriage. Beelzebub is happy with his victory, but Caucasus thinks about it. He looks sad that he won't get his share of delicious food. Various notices this just in time, and offers him to lift the carriage so that he can also get his share. He immediately lights up with enthusiasm. This task is nothing to him. At this time, the carriage is stationary. Someone inside her asks what the situation is like. The knight, drenched from the rain, reports that they are completely stuck in the mud. We'll have to wait for the rain to pass a little. They can only hope that they will make it before tomorrow's exam. Suddenly, the man reacts to some noise. The knight looks up warily. He sees Caucasus landing next to the carriage. His jaw drops open in shock, and his face is full of horror. The man in the carriage does not see this, and tries to find out what kind of shaking just happened. All the knight can do is shout a warning about the monster's arrival, but then the beetle grabs the back of the carriage. The man sitting there doesn't understand what's going on. The wheel is released from the puddle by the force of the Caucasus. He sets up the carriage properly. Then the passenger realizes that they got out of the mud. But the knight is aggressive. He orders the monster to let go of the carriage. Now Various feels uneasy, even if he suspected it would be so. After all, an ignorant person will think that the monster is attacking the carriage. So he shouts from his cloud and asks the knight to wait. As Various jumps down, he orders Nimbus Cloud to set up a barrier around the carriage. He lands near the Caucasus, much to the knight's surprise. A barrier keeps them all out of the rain, and the knight looks at it warily. Various tries to apologize for scaring these people, and asks the knight to calm down, because the Caucasus beetle is his pet. But this only makes the knight angry. He accuses the young man of lying. After all, white hair shows that before him is a sage. Various seemed to have forgotten about changing his hair color himself. The knight continues to push, adding that he has never heard of anyone taming a Caucasus. Then the man from the carriage intervenes. He orders the knight to cool down, and it turns out, reminding them that, in any case, this company helped them out. Also, Various has his back to the monster, which makes the man incredibly nervous, even if he's holding his face. Who, if not the owner, is capable of such a thing? Caucasus looks at his man with a smile, and he thanks the aristocrat who came to his aid. But the man rejects the gratitude and admits that he could not properly understand such an unusual situation. After all, they really helped him out by getting the carriage out of the mud. Therefore, the man holds out a bulky bag as a sign of gratitude. Surprised, Various tries to refuse, but the man smiles confidently, and the young man cannot but accept the gift. After that, he calls his cloud and says goodbye to a strange man. He expresses the hope that they will meet again somewhere. Various nods, smiling, and flies away. Rain once again falls on the people from the carriage, and the knight continues to stare in shock at the sky when his superiors remind him that it's time for them to go too. And then he advises you not to think about what happened for too long. They can finally move on. This meeting gives Various an idea. Caucasus stands out too much, so it will scare everyone in town. Therefore, he should become the size of an ordinary fly, like Beelzebub. Chewing Beetle doesn't mind, and the King of Flies also agrees to fulfill the request. Without procrastinating, they decrease, and they settle on the shoulders of a satisfied Various. Now they calmly continue their journey, already reaching the city. Together with the beetles, the young man walks along a busy street. At the hotel, he pays too much money, scaring the staff either with this or with the bugs that have become a little bigger. They eat calmly and deliciously, and then spend the night in this hotel. The next day, the young man stands in front of the gates of the elite Academy of Magic. He is determined to win her over. Finally, this day has arrived. The Academy courtyard is full of excited people. Various is standing near the reception desk. The employee asks him to show her a letter of recommendation, and the young man belatedly remembers about it. He received the necessary paper before leaving. His letter of introduction was given by Purcell's father, the lord of those lands. Handing it over, the man asks not to lose the letter. Then Various exchanged glances with Caucasus. He took out a gift for his benefactor from the vault. Even though he won't refund the cost of studying at the academy, the young man wants to offer it as a token of gratitude. At first, the lord laughingly asks Various not to rush, because he has not even entered yet, but he changes his expression to one of shock when he sees exactly what he's been handed. This is a very rare material, the skin of the Ermungan snake. Even his assistant is shocked. As the lord tries to keep his face straight, Various worries that such a gift isn't enough. But in reality, this is too expensive a gift. When the young man left, the lord and his assistant watched him go, confused for a while. And then they began to examine even a seemingly incredibly valuable piece of leather. Still, this child is too unusual. Now that Various has received a well-paid recommendation letter from the lord, he hands it to the academy employee. Then he follows the other applicants to classroom C. First comes the written part, and the young man is going to do everything in his power. He calmly surveys the audience. The room isn't fully filled yet, but an observer is already standing at the board. When they were all seated, they laid out a list of questions. The bell announcing the start of the exam rang. Immediately, Various begins to write actively. Then, it gets stuck on one of the tasks. Spends some time thinking, sighs over the sheet. But he catches an epiphany in time, and quickly begins to fill out your sheet. While the others are exhausted or desperate, Various lets out a sigh of relief. He managed to answer all the tasks and intends to pass the practical part with the same attitude. It takes place in a large arena, and there are really a lot of people here. One of the participants with a long blade rushes to attack. Watching the fight, Various realizes that they will be competing with upperclassmen. He wanders around, trying to find his battlefield, when something starts falling from above, and after landing right next to Various, he finds himself beaten beyond recognition by a man. A wild-eyed girl standing in the nearest arena says that this year's entrants are quite frail. With a smirk, she looks at Various, asking if he's next in line. Then the young man, to the horror on the faces of the other students, confirms and goes up to the arena. The girl, proud of herself, brags about her strength. She tells him how unlucky Various was to have her in his way. Best in her second year at the academy, 80 die. Looking at her red hair, Various realizes that the girl in front of him is a hero. But she is not happy with the way the young man looks at her. While the audience whispers, the girl takes a fighting stance. Various takes out his staff and prepares for battle as well. This attracts the heroine's attention. She directly asks if the young man is going to beat her with this stick stub. To her, it looks like Various is laughing at her. But when he smiles, he apologizes. After all, it's the best weapon he has with him. This seems to make the girl angry. She thought about loosening her grip a little, but then changes her mind. Her new pose looks quite threatening. The heroine's stance is one of pure murderous intent. She smiles horribly, telling Various to know the wrath of the one who laughs last, but he's standing quietly at the other end of the arena. 80 thinks that her opponent isn't even going to defend himself, and she's going to end it all at once before he even takes a step. But as soon as the signal sounds for the start of the duel, the sword flies out of her hands. Apparently, Various had knocked it out with his staff, but the girl is shocked by what happened. She only gets distracted when the examiner asks her what she does and tells her to hold the sword tight. The crowd wonders why the sophomore threw the sword up, and the girl herself is confused by what happened. She realizes that something has knocked the sword out of her hands. Various knows from the reactions of others that he did it too quickly. The examiner tells them to get ready again. Confused and angry, the heroine once again strikes an attacking pose. She doesn't know what Various did, but she's angry that he dared to embarrass her. Therefore, when a new signal sounds, it rushes forward, promising to kill your opponent quickly. She swings without holding back, but Various replaces the sword with his staff. This time, he has a different plan. First, the young man will stop her strike. It will weaken the pressure. And then he will shift her position with the staff. And with a light movement, he will knock out the sword. The girl is disarmed again. After all, this time Various sent her sword flying so that everyone could see it. The end of his staff stops at the sophomore's throat. The young man's gaze is resolute, and his opponent is shocked and doesn't understand what just happened. She falls to the floor of the arena, exhausted, looking at the winner of her entrant in confusion. Only now, somewhere behind her, her sword falls. The audience and even the examiner freeze in shock. Various has to remind the referee to announce the results. Then he comes to his senses. Dissatisfied with the delay, Various reduces his staff and leaves the arena amid the gossip of the audience and the confused look of the defeated aide. Now everyone around him is looking at him and discussing him as the one who defeated the very same aide. Various covers his ears irritably and decides to ignore them. Since he won the best one in his sophomore year, things are going pretty well. But you can't relax, because you still need to pass the magic part of the exam. The new exam field is located outside the arena. A crowd of applicants is waiting for their turn to use the targets. Now one of the possible first-year students is preparing to speak. A small light forms in his palm, and the young man sends him flying. A clot of flame hits the target, but not the center. Watching this, Various feels puzzled. The next entrant forms magic on the tip of their index finger. Thin arrows of magic hit each of the targets, very close to the bullseye, and sometimes directly into it. Even if this student looks very proud, and people around him are surprised at his strength, Various is not thrilled. He's next. The only task is to hit 5 targets with magic. The young man understands the task. The targets don't even move. In this case, Various decides to concentrate his powers and use a certain magic. He begins to recite a spell, appealing to the magic that flows in him. The examiner is startled by this, and Various continues. He asks for magic to ignite the flame of Uemon and pierce through his enemy, and then shoots a fire arrow at the targets. The magic goes right through one of the targets, right through the center. And then the arrow branches out and pierces the rest of the targets too, with the same accuracy. The force is so overwhelming that dust is thrown up into the air even behind the targets. Various is happy with the result, but the examiner is terrified that the targets are broken. This slightly cools the ardor of the young man. He hadn't even considered the simplest fact, that maybe the targets didn't need to be broken. However, judging by the training ground, Various did not limit himself to them. Various looks around awkwardly, afraid that he's really overdone it this time. He rushes to the examiner and asks for forgiveness, directly asking if it was impossible to break them. But he is surprised by the question and assures that you should not worry about it. The man just didn't think that such a result could be achieved with the help of a spell. This causes Various to freeze in surprise. It seems that this world doesn't know about the real spell. Then the young man tries to explain why this happened. There is a method for adjusting the vocal cords, so that the spell is pronounced with a certain frequency, and the power increases significantly. The examiner, however, does not understand this logic. In any case, Various hit all the targets at the same time, so he has the maximum score. And now he can rest. With a look of disbelief on his face, the young man accepts his papers from the teacher. The line continues to move, but Various feels empty because the examiner didn't understand what was explained to him. 3 days later, it's time to come back for the exam results. Various checks the number issued to him and tries to find it on the bulletin board. The number is located quickly. This makes him let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, indistinct figures appear behind us. One of them is the man from the carriage that Various and his bugs helped pull out. He is the first to notice and call out to the young man. He even comes closer, reminding her exactly where they met. Then Various remembers too. He says he's glad to see the man. The man is surprised to learn that this child turned out to be an incoming student and asks what the results are. Various happily says that fortunately he entered. This pleases the man, even if he is not surprised. After all, the young man was able to tame Caucasus. Various then asks if this person teaches at the academy, but he is not a teacher, but a deputy chairman of the Board of Education. He watches the applicants with a smile. It is his responsibility to grant an exemption from one subject to one of the best applicants. And now the deputy chairman has come to see who deserves this opportunity. Moreover, this year is very special. Attention is once again focused on the bulletin board. Straight to the number Various was awarded, 0415. A man with a face full of emotions describes him as an incredible child who showed an unprecedented result in the maximum score. Therefore, the deputy chairman came to see it with his own eyes. But his whole attitude is knocked down by Various, showing his card and admitting that it's him. The man stops in mid-sentence. Its atmosphere completely changes, because if we are talking about Various, then there can be no questions. Although such a reaction makes the young man feel uncomfortable. The deputy chairman already had a package with an application for exemption from one academic subject with him. So he immediately hands it to Various, which Various accepts gratefully. Finally, I advise you to use it wisely. The man leaves. School days begin. Various now has a document showing that he is a student at the academy. There is a dining room here. Show your document to the employee here, and get a portion of delicious food. This is a good environment to think about your future plans. Various does not need to attend classes in subjects that he has knowledge of from a previous life. So he decides to let himself choose only the necessary items, all for the sake of improving the training of tamers and changing the attitude of others. However, Various can simply study hard for exams in mandatory subjects at the end of the semester. Then he remembers the application for exemption from one academic subject that he received earlier. This gives him the idea to choose one optional subject from the ones he is good at and use the exemption on the other. And then Various will be able to practically not attend the academy, instead taking the opportunity to show the usefulness of tamers outside its walls. This, among other things, will speed up the change in the opinion of others about them. With these thoughts, the young man fills out all the documents. His plan is formed. After some time, Various goes outside the academy and summons his cloud. He gets to the town of Merkels. Here, he needs a large, but not particularly remarkable building. It's an adventurer's guild. Without hesitation, Various steps inside. The adventurers are watching him. Sages still attract attention, but that's what Various was counting on. He walks up to the front desk and addresses a personable-looking employee, wanting to register with the guild. The woman professionally provides him with documents to fill out immediately. When a young man writes down his data, she pays attention to his appearance and recognizes the academy uniform. Then he asks to see his student ID. Various pulls it out of storage without a word. Authentication is fast. Thanks to this, Various is released from the guild exam. Also, his adventurer rank starts at C rank. The employee holds out a thick booklet, saying that this is a guild member card that can't be lost. This document is also sent to the repository. For now, Various is planning to find some good assignment on the local bulletin board. His eyes fall on one of the ads, a mission to collect moon metal. The payment is good. For 1 gram of material, 200 zol. Various makes calculations in his mind. In an inexpensive dining room, lunch costs 1,000 dizol. And even if the price depends on the weight, it's still pretty good. Various brings a flyer to the counter, saying that he will take this assignment. The employee first happily accepts this. But then he notices exactly what task the young man took. She warns him to be careful, because some adventurers have already tried to fulfill it, but they always came back with serious injuries. According to the victims, while collecting lunar metal, arrows flew at them out of nowhere. Without a bit of worry, Various reassures the employee that he knows how to use a healing spell. Then the woman gives up and just wishes her luck. Since this boy is a sage, shouldn't she be worried? On its cloud, Various flies to the desired area for completing the task. When he arrives, he descends. This time, his companion beetles are also here, and they are in their full size. The moon metal must be somewhere nearby. Various asks Caucasus to deal with a small matter, to which he no doubt agrees. A group of insect-like monsters comes out from behind the growths on the ground. They immediately rush to attack, but Caucasus steps out to meet them. Fully trusting him, Various calmly walks on, leaving them behind. One close look, and one hit knocks opponents down from the power. When the dust settles on the ground, only corpses can be seen. The beetle gets a well-deserved commendation. Now all they have to do is quickly collect all the lunar metal. Beelzebub attracts the young man's attention. He starts talking about the shooter that the guild warned about. After all, this is probably the one who is sitting behind their backs, hiding behind a rock. The staff is already in your hands. Various says nothing, his face serene. He reaches for a large piece of moon metal. Then the enemy moves in its place, and the first arrow goes to Various. He easily dodges. More shots follow the first one, and the youth attacks back. His staff increases and destroys the enemy's cover. Beelzebub asks if Various missed on purpose, but Various is busy, focused on the fight. He shouts in the direction of the enemy, telling them to stop, and he promises that he's not going to hurt him. There's a brief silence between them, but in the end, an unknown shooter emerges from his hiding place. A beautiful but formidable girl appears before Various group. Even though she was out, a peaceful conversation was clearly not going to happen. The girl pulls out a new arrow. She readies the bow for firing, and he's aiming directly at Various. Even if Caucasus and Beelzebub are ready to fight, even if they want to, their master asks them to retreat. He even folds and puts away his staff. Then he holds up his empty hands to show that he's unarmed. The archer watches in silence. He says amiably that, first of all, he would like to hear an explanation from a stranger. And depending on the situation, it may ask you to remove the task of mining lunar metal. Now the girl looks interested. She lowers her bow. Then Various steps closer and introduces himself, showing no hint of fear. He even admits that he only looks like a sage, but is actually a tamer. Various then introduces Caucasus as his pet, and Beelzebub as the first beetle's friend. The girl doesn't look like she cares, but she introduces herself anyway. Her name is Artemis. An awkward silence follows. Various is even embarrassed. He tries to continue the conversation, assuming that the girl in front of him is a hero, but she doesn't seem to understand what the young man in front of her is talking about. Then Various tries to explain what he means by liking the profession. The archer's hair was red, so he guessed. This makes the girl understand what it is about. But she easily and without warning admits that she is not human. Magic swirls around her, causing Various to take half a step back. The young man closes himself from the wind that blows around the interlocutor. And when you can open your eyes again. The sight is too incredible. After all, the true form of a girl is a rich-looking bow. This is shocking, even for Various, who has seen so much. When the girl's form is restored, the two sit down on the rocks to talk. The bow girl tells her story. Once upon a time, she lived on the moon. But one day, a comet crashed into the surface, and the impact sent it flying hard. And then I fell on this planet. Various suggests that it wasn't easy for her. The girl doesn't deny it. It won't survive if it doesn't feed on the energy from the moon metal. After all, the moon is a huge lunar metal. Proud, the girl says that if she was as strong as she once was on the moon, she could erase everything around her in one blow. A look of sadness crosses her face. After all, now the girl lives off the fragments of the moonstone that flew here with her. The situation makes Various think. If this is the case, simply withdrawing the collection order will not solve the problem completely. Looks like he has a better suggestion. The girl looks blank, and then Various suggests trying to get her back to the moon. It shocks her. But the next second, she's approaching, excited, asking if Various can actually do it. He honestly says that he can't say for sure, but he wants to try something. To do this, the girl needs to turn into a bow again. Without any objections, the girl does so, and Various summons the Nimbus Cloud. On it, they go up together. On the way, the young man turns to Caucasus. He supports a telepathic conversation. The Nimbus Cloud will not be able to rise higher, so Various suggests using it to fly. But Beetle nervously refuses, saying he can't lift them that high. Artemis intervenes in their conversation. It turns out that she can communicate telepathically and heard everything they said. Various is embarrassed to be overheard. Artemis then asks how long Ruya's staff can stretch. Although he had never personally tested it, he had heard that the maximum length was 960,000 kilometers. According to the girl, this figure should be enough. After that, Various takes the staff in his hands and thinks about how to fix it. Caucasus offers to use his ice magic and freeze the lake, but Beelzebub objects. After all, his magic is so strong that all the animals in this lake can die. Artemida returns to human form and suggests increasing their frost resistance so that living creatures can survive this for sure. After that, Various decides to try this method. They go down on a cloud to the lake. Various pauses above the surface of the water, staff at the ready. It dips one end into the water. Afterward, Artemis reports that she has increased her survival rate, and Caucasus is ordered to use ice magic. Ice spikes radiate from its paws. The lake glitters brightly. Task completed. Water is frozen. Now its nimbus clouds turn to act. It hovers over the free end of the staff and forms a protective dome around it. Preparation is complete. Now it's time for them to go to the moon. The staff flies up sharply, starting to grow larger. The dome can withstand this load. The umbrella's ability is really very useful. Like a strange long flower, a pole with a dome at the end soars above the clouds. They will soon be out of the atmosphere. Various looks very relaxed, and even his bugs are not worried at all. They are more admiring the view that opens up to them, which they have never met before. Deciding that now is a good time to observe celestial bodies, Various uses observation magic. All around them is the blackness of space and the brightness of a scattering of stars. Various recalls his past life as he and his tamed beasts, the slug and the lich, watched the sky. A certain planet with 2 moons seems so far away. The young man really misses those times. And here is a part of the cosmos that is familiar to him, but that same planet looks different. Various freezes at the sight. This makes Caucasus worry. But the young man is too shocked. After all, for some reason, that planet has 4 moons. And as far as he can remember, there should only be 2 of them. This is another planet. After all this time, Various finally realizes everything. What the Tamers don't know about the boost spell. And that no one knew about the real spell. And of course the fact that Tamers are treated unfairly as a lower class. All this is explained by the fact that he was on a completely different planet. Finally, they reach the moon. The Various extends beyond the cloud's protective dome and tells Artemis in the shape of a bow that they have reached. She takes a few moments to realize this. She turns abruptly, full of delight. Views of the native moon please her. She's absolutely happy. And she thanks Various because she didn't believe before that she would ever be able to return. The girl is so happy that she leans her face against the surface of the moon. Her powers are returning. But she quickly comes to her senses and apologizes for her behavior, which Various witnessed. Artemis coughs uncomfortably, and she holds out her hand to the young man, asking him to return the favor. He doesn't understand what all this is about, but he fulfills her request. Then Artemis grabs his palm with both hands, which have strange cracks in them. In gratitude for Various bringing her home, she's going to share her power with him. A pleasant warm sensation flows into him through Artemis' touch, and the same thin streaks spread across his skin, all the way to his face. This is the divine power of communication. This kind of power wasn't something Various had ever heard of, even in his previous world. In simple terms, this is a special power that creatures like Artemis have. Now Various understands and wonders if it is possible for him to have such power. But the girl undoubtedly confirms his right. However, she only created channels for circulation in it, which people like her have from birth. And how to use this power is up to Various to decide. He wonders what other options there are. As if it were something ordinary, Artemis talks about simple shots at first, but then moves on to the time management and resurrection of the dead that are available after training. As a final touch, the ability to communicate regardless of distance. Various clings to the ability to manage time. After all, this ability is considered impossible even with the use of magic. He sincerely thanks Artemis for the gift and promises to try to contact her. The girl from the moon offers to contact her at any time if something is not clear. And then he remembers his assignment to collect Luna metal. After all, the moon is the repository of Luna metal, so Various can take as much as he wants. For a second, the young man freezes from such generosity. But he's not going to be shy and immediately applies the storage magic flowing down his arm. His actions leave a new crater on the surface of the moon. He asks if he took too much. Artemis doesn't mind, but she's confused about how much various storage can hold. She continues to watch in disbelief as the young man wraps up the gift. He is happy because there is too little lunar metal on Earth. After all, it's time to say goodbye. Artemis asks Varius to promise to contact her at least once in a while. He waves goodbye, ready to head back. And the moon girl thanks the man one last time for his help. The staff gradually shortens, moving away from the surface of the moon. Soon, Varius returns to the Adventurers Guild. He even wonders how much moon metal they'll take from him. The young man tries to attract the attention of the staff, and someone hurries up. This is the employee who warned about the shooter earlier. She apologizes for waiting. And she is amazed that Varius came to her, still alive. Tom is surprised by this reaction. The girl decided that the young man was dead because he had not appeared for a long time since he took on his first task. But he's fine, and he has the moon metal with him too. The guild employee quickly adjusts to her work schedule and asks exactly how much Varius brought in. He, however, asks the answer question, how much they are willing to buy. Usually, no one brings up enough money to raise such a question at all, so it asks for starters to show how much it has. In the next instant, a mountain of metal, probably as high as Varius himself, is already standing on the counter, and this is a small fraction. After all, the other 80% is in his storage. The employee has to run away again in a hurry. Then the young man realizes that he still offered too much. The girl returns with an impressive-looking man. She says that she has never seen such an unrealistic amount of lunar metal. The man looks up at Varius, and he sees the very mountain they told him about. The young man, trying to remain polite, greets the stranger. He is silent while the employee adds about the words about 80 more of the same parties. And if the young man is telling the truth, then there won't be a penny left in the guild treasury. The man takes out a writing pen and a piece of paper on which he writes something. This time, they want to buy 2 mountains. This pleases Varius, and he agrees to the deal without any objections. The agreed amount is immediately unloaded. While Varius fills out all the necessary documents, he asks the employee nearby what the lunar metal is usually used for. It turns out that for decorative purposes. Even if there is a rumor that someone from the nobility forged a sword from such metal, Varius decides to ask Artemis about the moon metal's uses later, and soon brings this plan to life. He contacts the moon girl, asking if she is still awake, but the proud Artemis calls his question stupid because she is not a person, so she does not need a dream. So Varius can ask his own question right away. He wonders how good moon metal is for forging. The question makes Artemis think. If one didn't use the divine link power, the sword would be useless, but with it, it would become much sharper. Varius doesn't look too impressed, as his current strength level is low, but enough to make a moon metal sword comparable to a mithril blade. However, if he practiced, he would be able to cut the orichalcum like a piece of soft butter. He is already more interested in such prospects. This conversation helped Varius a lot, so he promises to continue to contact Artemis, which she is incredibly happy with. Now the young man decides what the sword should do, just in case. Maybe someday he wouldn't be able to use Ruyi's staff. He is not going to think long and immediately goes to turn the plan into reality. So he's heading for the blacksmith shop. He says hello, trying to get the blacksmith's attention, but he's too busy asking what Varius needs. So the young man directly says that he wants to order a sword made of moon metal. The clatter of the hammer on the forming blade fades. The blacksmith freezes grimly at his words. Then he turns and glares at me. He asks threateningly what Varius just said. In one step, the blacksmith approaches and looms over the young man who did not expect such a thing. He took it as a personal insult to be asked to forge a useless sword, but Varius isn't going to back down. He agrees that the moon metal sword is pretty useless. The blacksmith he chose must be proud of his skill and work, and so he doesn't want to forge a sword that won't be used in battle. But Varius has powers that can increase the power of this blade tenfold. The blacksmith's bloodshot eyes watch the youth's expression, and in the end, he decides that Varius isn't lying, but he's still far from friendly, and calls the price of 15,000 Zol, without taking into account the material. The number makes Various' eyes widen. The glitter of the blades that the blacksmith is proud of heats up the atmosphere. He openly threatens the child in front of him. For such a price, he is willing to make a sword, but only if Various does not deceive him, and if the blacksmith doesn't like the way this sword will cut with his powers. Various will have to pay 3 times as much. Such conditions clearly make the young man feel annoyed. The blacksmith looming over the child warns about his conditions, and Various agrees to them. Even if he has to train his divine power to convince this blacksmith, he asks when the sword will be ready, and the blacksmith dismissively replies that in 10 days. Since he has so much time, Various decides to go to the labyrinth of the Elite Academy of Magic. From the vault, he pulls out a map. Only in this place would he be able to train his divine power effectively. You can also clean out the maze, but there are more important things. Various wants to test 2 things: whether he can evenly distribute the experience between the divine power and the rest of the stats, and try to feel its passage through touching the moonstone. In addition, this training will help Various complete an independent task to complete the maze. The place where it is located looks picturesque. There is no queue in the distribution window it needs. The friendly coworker says that she sees him for the first time and starts a light conversation. Various answers her politely. The woman is rummaging behind her counter for something. He pulls out a bracelet, telling me to put it on. This is a sensor for calculating success. Without it, the student's achievements will not be recorded. Various puts it on immediately and thanks the employee, and then immediately runs to get down to business. He is shouted after to be careful, because it is difficult for beginners to pass the maze. Therefore, it is better not to go further than the 5th floor, but other people's warnings are useless for Various. He ascends to the 26th floor of the Academy's labyrinth in the blink of an eye. His opponents here are hybrid monsters, monkeys, and snakes. One of them is just charging in. Ruya's staff is already ready, and Various manages to strike first. A barrage of blows hits the monster's large body, leaving it no chance. Beelzebub and Caucasus behind them are also busy exterminating their enemies. So the experience keeps coming. Even when Various does not attack, but tries to use divine power, the flow does not stop. Since it is up to the individual to decide what to spend their experience on, as expected, divine power can also be developed at will. Various has something else to check out, so he decides to stay on this floor. But he sends his bugs to go and clear the maze further, promising to catch up. When they leave, Various is left alone. He pulls out a small piece of lunar metal from his vault. As far as the young man understands, if you put power through this material, it will start to glow. While the case completely engrossed him, the undone monster is slowly approaching. The creature rises and prepares to strike, as Various focuses his divine power in the hand that holds the metal. A piece of ore begins to glow. This is noticeable to the naked eye, and shows that everything is working out for him. Imbued with the power of a lump of ore, Various throws it towards the monster's large fist, which was aimed directly at him. A tiny piece of metal, smaller than a fist, crushes the other's flesh, demonstrating superior strength. And it flies on, not limited to the snake monkey's paw. The doge creature's muzzle deforms, and the blow throws the monster back. He screams in pain, bleeding profusely, and it doesn't rise again. Even Various himself is surprised that he was able to defeat the lesser echidna with a single blow. Thinking back to his conversation with Artemis, he thinks he can do something, and he calls the girl from the moon because he wants to ask her something. Artemis responds instantly, and Various immediately gets down to business. It wants to move in space. The girl is amazed at his desire to try a time and space-changing skill so early. Various, however, does not see this as a problem. Artemis herself is embarrassed by the young man's calm reaction. Confused, she tries to sound serious, though. The girl from the moon already knows that Various is not a stupid guy, but she must warn him. To use this type of skill, you must follow a strict procedure. Therefore, he must not miss a single word of her explanation. Even after listening to everything, Various resolutely says that he is ready. Then Artemis begins her briefing. The skill is applied in 2 stages. First, you need to focus your gaze on the place where it wants to move, and then you need to move the force there. Then you need to concentrate it in your eyes and provide a path and direction to the point where you need to get to. Right when Artemis explains, Various starts following the instructions. His eyes are burning from using the Force. The divine power is concentrated in Various' eyes. He closes them, following Artemis' instructions, and sees it. This surprises the girl from the moon, but she asks if the young man can see his body. He can see, but his left half is buried in the wall. If Various teleported now, that part of him would get stuck, and the young man would die. This prospect does not please him. Most accidents occur due to carelessness when checking the teleportation location. This makes Various even more cautious. Artemis suggests that he try again, now checking the location of the body, and as if moving the divine power to that place. Various concentrates on the task with all his might, and starting from his feet, his body starts to disappear. And then it appears in another part of the maze. Various opens his eyes, nervous but delighted. It freezes for a second, and he brags to Artemis about what he did. She praises her student. Not everyone copes with the first time. At this time, the bugs continued to advance. The 28th floor was almost finished. Caucasus asks if there is anyone else around, and Beelzebub confidently declares that there is no one else within a kilometer radius. And then Various appears behind them and thanks them for their work. This scares the bugs. They jump away and ask how a person could appear here. Various doesn't miss the opportunity to brag about using teleportation, but it doesn't matter because they've completed their goal, so it's time for them to leave. The beetles continue to stare at him, tense, and they start cursing at how Various is getting off topic. The 10 days that had been agreed upon were over, and the young man came to collect his sword. He's basically ready, but the blacksmith's mood is far from good. The first thing he asks is if Various has brought the payment. He has the money with him, but he can't help but grumble. Was this sword really that hard to craft? The blacksmith opens the door in his workshop and invites the young man there. This is a place where weapons can be tested. Without hesitation, Various follows the blacksmith in, and he tells you how the work on the order went. He used a special whetstone and changed the temperature for incandescence and used various other methods, but it still turned out to be worse than just a dummy. Variusa is surprised that this blacksmith even worked on the sword, so she assures him that the effort wasn't entirely in vain, which is a pretty strong statement. The moonmetal sword stands on its stand at the other end of the room. It looks like nothing more than a decor, and it seems rather short in Various hands, especially with the blacksmith looming like a mountain behind him. But the blade is light and allows you to swing the weapon without losing your balance. The chosen blacksmith turned out to be a master of his craft. I was even able to match the size of the weapon to the buyer's physique. As Various tries on his sword, the blacksmith pulls out a makiwara. He had already tried the blade on her on his own, but all that was left was a tiny footprint on the side. So the blacksmith demands to demonstrate right now if the youngster can do better. Various concentrates the divine connection without exchanging words. Under its influence, the metal itself is modified. It takes less than a second to hit, and the blade is already going right through Makiwara. The cut is absolutely flat, and the dummy breaks in half, and Various didn't even feel the blade go through. There was no resistance.